Today, Sony still can't beat the Elden Ring DLC and they're taking drastic measures. This is CheckPoint. Welcome to CheckPoint. The winds have calmed over the West Coast and have claimed only the treasures of Lady Margolite, including the dreaded jewel of Camogneur.
The jewel is the key to upending the power balance that the corrupt nobility hold over the twinned realms of Fernwood and Harris Green.
It is your destiny, hero, to brave the ocean deep and reclaim your father's birthright.
Also, there's a story about Pokemon this week.
I wish we had more dramatic lighting in the studio.
Competitive sandwich-making simulator Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is celebrating a milestone this month where players have finally eaten more than 432 million sandwiches since the game duo launched 2 years ago. The Pokemon Company offered a deep dive on the most popular ingredients for sandwiches, and surprising everyone, butter turned out to be a top condiment, standing side by side with another excellent seasoning, salt. Indeed, the popular Pokemon title proved that people are in love with simple sandwiches, such as the school-time standard of butter, peanut butter, banana, and ham. Who among us hadn't harassed their parents every morning with the old, "Stow those Lunchables, mother dear, what I hunger for is the classic peanut butter and hamana. And don't skimp on the butter, that's how you make the shiniest sandwich." The Pokemon Company also shared that Scarlet and Violet, so named after famed sandwich condiments ketchup and purple ketchup, have sold 8.9 million copies and are now the top-selling sandwich sims of all time for Japan, finally outselling the previous top dogs, Pokemon Red and Green, so named after famed sandwich condiments ketchup and green ketchup.
Big news this week as it was confirmed that Sony is angling to buy Elden Ring and Bloodborne developer Fromsoftware, sending ripples of fear through the Soulsborne fanbase. Except that's not what Sony is doing, but it also is probably the reason why they're doing it. Midweek, a press release by Kadokawa Corporation confirmed rumors that, yes, Sony has made their intent known to buy out a controlling interest in Kadokawa Corporation. Who are the Kadokawa Corporation? Well, they own a lot of things. This year they had a revenue of over $1.6 billion US. They have a massive print publication arm, movie and animation subsidiaries, and they even own Japan's local YouTube alike Nico Nico. In the gaming space, Kadokawa owns Spike Chunsoft, the originators of Dragon Quest and longtime devs of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series. And yes, they also own just under 70% of Fromsoftware, with the remaining 30% split almost evenly between Tencent and Sony. So, yes, if Sony's plan goes ahead, they will circuitously own a controlling stake in Fromsoftware. But there is zero way that was their entire impetus for this acquisition. The point I'm trying to make is that Kadokawa is much larger than Fromsoftware. But, I mean, Sony would still hypothetically control Fromsoftware, so does that mean all future Souls-like titles are doomed to be PS5 exclusives with no hope of port or even remake like Bloodborne? No, because that would be telling investors we've purposefully decided to make less money, and investors hate that. At this point, it's clear that they've determined remaking Bloodborne would cost more than it would make, despite how much I would personally like it. You'll see future FromSoft titles being timed exclusives, probably, and more importantly, this is an assurance that FromSoftware games just will definitely release on Sony platforms. It's gonna be okay. Except, of course, that no merger or acquisition on this scale has ever benefited the consumer or even a majority of employees. But, they're not killing John Elden Ring.
It's Sonic's 30th anniversary, and what better way to celebrate than smacking him with a rod of carbon and steel? If you're like me, you've heard of golf, the Scottish sport of kings, but you've never actually tasted it. And now, much like a haggis, the Scots have stuffed the hedgehog into a place you wouldn't have thought, and they're inviting you to Robbie Burns your ass into praising it. According to the trailer, Sonic is teaming up with Topgolf in all its locations across the United States of America and also Glasgow. Players step into a dark room filled with people, smack a golf ball, and then your experience is quickly intercut with game footage of Sonic and friends running around on impossible structures, eating rings as is their wont. The camera will flash back to you enjoying yourself staring at a Sonic logo in the distance while other people beside you smack their balls around too. Eventually, the Sonic buddies all count up the rings they collected, and we assume whoever collected the least is the winner, because after all, this is golf. It's a brand collaboration that Topgolf Chief Brand Officer Jeff Cottrell called, heavily redacted quote, "little fun," and that Sega's Senior Vice President and Chief Business and Brand Officer of Sonic, head of Sega Brands, Ivo Gerskovich called, heavily redacted quote, "the final product." I, for one, can't wait for this to come in second on Metacritic to the blockbuster Sonic game, The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Less than a month after shuttering its own AAA game studio, Netflix is opening a generative AI gaming studio. In a post made on LinkedIn, Mike Verdu, formerly Netflix's founder of and former vice president in charge of Netflix Games, announced that he is now Netflix's VP of Gen AI for games, saying he is, quote, working on driving a once-in-a-generation inflection point for game development and player experiences using generative AI. The slopmonger goes on to say that generative AI is, quote, the next big challenge after the raw primordial act of creation. At no point in his post does he actually discuss which presumed challenges presented by generative AI he is hoping to meet, only that, quote, we'll have to adapt and change. But when have we failed to meet that challenge as an industry? Wow, that's an interesting question. And even though it's structured as being rhetorical, it's actually worth trying to answer. Earlier in his post, he acknowledges that he has started and sold 3 startups and 3 divisions in larger organizations. Are his previously shuttered game studios challenges that his industry has met? Did the employees of those companies adapt and change? Hopefully they did. Do you think he even knows? The last paragraph discusses how this change was a planned transition. Do you think the devs recruited away from other game studios to work at Project Blue knew about that plan? What a fascinating thing to put into writing. His post ends with a generative AI landscape showing a winding road leading through a green rural valley towards a misty city dominated by skyscrapers at dawn. You can tell it's AI because the shadows are inconsistent and your visual attention is split between the skyscrapers, the sun, and the road rising up from your feet, which does not lead to the promised city in the distance. So this is slop, but it's accidentally extremely funny and revealing. Whatever future is on display here is not for you. Bob Ross could have done something 1,000 times more visually coherent with one hand while nurturing a baby squirrel with the other. But that would have created a job where someone could have been creative, and those are apparently challenges to be overcome. Remember when Netflix tried to rebrand their DVD division as Quickster and everyone said, that's awful, they can be bullied?
I'm a little skittish about bullying brands on main, just in case the social media managers like it.
It's the only way these companies are ever going to get publicly owned.
Coming up, Balatro is a nominee for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. But even if they lose, don't worry. They can always release DLC every year until they win.
All right, Game Awards, Game of the Year nominations.
Yeah.
Interesting spread.
They have the indie punching bag. It's like we got to get one in here that everybody can want, and then we cannot vote for.
I hope Balatro wins. Balatro is an amazing. It's honestly an amazing game.
But that's the thing, is that every year that they nominate a single indie studio to be Game of the Year, to be like, look, we're thinking of all games made in all places. It's like, sure you are.
Yeah.
But also, Shadows of the Erd Tree, I'm a little weird about.
I think that's the one that I think people are having the most consternation or discussion around. And as a big fan of Elden Ring and the Shadow of the Erd Tree DLC, yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Good for them, but it is, it's a DLC on scale with many sequels.
Yeah, that you could see a game as big as this released just on its own. And they just said, we're just going to plug it in as DLC.
Yeah. If just the Shadow of the Erd Tree DLC had been marketed and released as Elden Ring 2, it would have been a massive disappointment.
Right.
But as a DLC, it's so much more than people were expecting.
Right.
Right. And so, I don't know. I saw someone making some rather disingenuous comparisons between like, well, how do we factor in like Elden Ring to Shadow of the Erdtree with Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom?
Oh, I would say that those are two separate games.
Yeah. And it's like, those are, well, yeah, but they are.
Yeah,
like,
they are.
I mean, they functionally are two separate games. They
Yeah.
weren't really, you know, but it's like, well, it's the same map and it's a lot of the same mechanics and there's a lot of reused graphics from the first game. And it's like, yeah, but there's also like all these new, let's go to the chart, you know.
Yeah.
There's all these new systems they created. Like it's a totally different thing. And honestly, just a brief aside, I still think it's impressive that all the marketing for Tears of the Kingdom was like, okay, yes, the surface map is the same, but with a lot of changes and like caves and things, and we've added new stuff. But then there's all the sky islands.
You're like, look up there, look up there,
Yeah.
look up there. Don't look at the ground, look up there.
And then you get the game and you have the map, you have all the sky islands, and at no point did they mention the depths.
Yeah.
Which is another whole thing again. And that's very impressive.
But I think there's just the idea with Erdtree where it's like, does this open a floodgate to be like, if you make a particularly impressive or aggressive DLC, like something that is that good, should it stand on its own as a game of the year, that it's like an enhancement to maybe a game that didn't qualify? Those are conversations that everybody who makes a decision have to have. And I think there's a worry that it's like, is someone just going to pay their way into doing it by just keeping releasing DLC?
Yeah. I don't know. They've changed their regulations around what can be nominated as Game of the Year to make this possible in terms of their rules. And I think it's going to be very dependent on personal preferences in years to come about like if a DLC feels big enough, not like the map size, but like if it feels like there's enough meat and depth in this DLC that's like, this is almost a whole game. Yeah, this, you know what, we're going to say that this is Game of the Year. And like, I think there is that for Shadow of the Erdtree. Great. I do think it's weird to see a DLC nominated for Game of the Year. I think Astrobot should win. Astrobot is one of the most lovingly crafted games I have played in so long. Everything in that game is just well considered.
I've heard that if you took all of the, like Heather was telling me, she's like, I don't see that the, I'm going to get this wrong maybe, and maybe I will get it wrong. If you took out all of the PlayStation tie-in promotional stuff as well, like remember this game that you never played, like that kind of thing. Even if you took all that out, the game itself is joyful to play. Like it's very Mario Odyssey and Mario Wonder kind of feeling, right? Lots of game mechanics that don't stick around too long, move you into a different game mechanic entirely, let you experiment with doing a lot of different things. It's like, I think that's what we wanted out of games, right? Is like novelty and fun. And it sounds like this game is novel and fun.
It really is. It's a really, really fun time, yeah. And then what are the other nominees? Balatro, Shadow of the Erdtree, Astrobot, Black Myth Wukong, which I haven't played. I hear is like okay, but is potentially more in there as like an industry achievement.
Yeah.
I believe, Black Myth Wukong also one of the lowest like Metacritic scores to ever be nominated.
Yeah, it's more sort of in there as like an acknowledgement of what the Chinese gaming industry has been able to accomplish.
They're trying almost to say that it's like, look, they've come out with a AAA game. They've invested a lot of money into a game that isn't just trying to advertise to you, or like whatever. Like it isn't just like a free to play or whatever. It's like they've actually made a game now that everybody in the West says we acknowledge that as being peer to what it is that we're doing, even if it does have the lowest aggregate Metacritic out of everybody.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, on the Game Awards FAQ explicitly says, expansion packs, new game seasons, DLC, remake, and remasters are all eligible in all categories.
Huh. Well, there we go. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is also nominated for Game of the Year. If it has to win anything, I hope it's this and not Best Narrative. And I played the whole game. I have some narrative questions. And then the other Game of the Year nominee is Metaphor Refantasio.
All right, yes.
Yeah, from the Persona team over at Atlas. And everything I've heard about that game is that it absolutely rips, and I cannot wait to watch Kathleen play it.
Nice.
which is forthcoming for those keeping score. We nothing scheduled yet, but she's eager to play it.
And if you want more lists to look at, the indie game developers have released their Game of the Year awards lists for the things that they are going to be giving awards to as well. So it's like dozens more games still, and Balattra's on their Game of the Year. UFO 50's up there. There's like a bunch of games. Go check that out. We can't just tell you them all here. That would be crazy.
I don't know if we're planning on doing any kind of co-stream of the Game Awards. I don't even know when it is.
Yeah, me neither.
Oh, December 12th. Well, maybe.
Oh, well.
Maybe. Who knows? For now, though, CheckPoint's back. Happy to be back. Desert Bus this year raised over $1.25 million in a week.
Yeah, and an actual full ass week, like 7 full days.
168 hours.
First time we've ever done that.
Yeah, we've never hit a full week before. I'm bowled over by it. Thank you all so much for all of your generosity for this charity. Yeah, it's wild. But we're back on the making the videos now. So glad you're here.
If you got any money left over from Desert Bus, you can go to patreon.com/loadingreadyrun or check out the store at store.loadingreadyrun.com. And thank you to people who are members of the YouTube channel here, because your names are going to come up right at the end of this video.
Yeah. But for now, I think that's it.
That's it.
Great.
We'll take off.
All right. Bye, everybody. I got it. We're good.